What's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. I'm Chris Lehto, retired F-16 pilot, now turned investigator into UFOs and the phenomenon. I was honored to talk to Ross Coulthart. Ross Coulthart, he's an investigative journalist from Australia, probably one of the few mainstream journalists to even take on this very difficult topic. He's attacked the stigma head on. He recently went across the US and has released 2 documentaries that have recently gone viral. In there he dropped some pretty big bombs, and in this interview with UAP Society, he dropped some pretty big bombs. The whole interview is over an hour. So the point of this video is to shorten that, to give you the highlights and my immediate reaction. I still recommend you watch the full interview on our sister channel, UAP Society YouTube. It's an amazing interview, and Ross is just an amazing person right now, really pushing this forward. I've never been more excited or optimistic that we will actually find out the truth, and I think we could find some actual real disclosure. I'm talking real disclosure, not this finger pointing vagueness that we've had up to now. I mean actual real extraterrestrial admission of craft, real contact, real proof that we're not alone. So let's get into this first section with Ross Coulthart.
You know, I've talked to Navy pilots, have absolutely nothing to gain by telling me information. You know, they showed me photographs of things that were very unusual. And in fact, there's something in our airspace that we do not control, and that ought to be very concerning.
Shortly after our interview, the congressman showed me in confidence the photographs he was talking about. If authentic, they're extraordinary. They are very clear Polaroid images of a hovering, metallic flying saucer. Do you think the United States knows a lot more than it's letting on?
The question is the United States hiding something? Well, of course.
Next, the United States government is in possession of alien technology.
I know it for a fact. I mean, I just know that.
Why do you know that?
Because I've spoken to the people who are about to come out and whistleblow on it.
Before you leave office, will you let us know if there's aliens?
No. An alien spacecraft did not crash in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947.
So there has been a cover-up.
Oh, yes.
Ross Coulthart, thank you so much, Ross, for being here. I know it's early there in Australia.
It's a pleasure to be with you guys. I'm honoured to be invited on UAP Society, and it's lovely to see Vinnie. Huge fan of all of you.
Good to see you, Ross.
The idea, Ross, was just to have a comfortable chat, really, to go over your documentary, essentially. You talked to some amazing people. So I saw Tim Burchett, he had some great comments in there, Michio Kaku, Gary Nolan. So I had a lot of questions on our Twitter as well about Gary Nolan, about the sphere, basically the shavings, when is it coming back?
I mean, the thing I'm excited about from my travels across the US is there is something about squeezing the flesh with people, about looking them in the eye, breaking bread with them, having a beer with them, getting to know them in a direct way. We're basically monkeys, we still smell pheromones, and we essentially the way we engage with each other is very tactile, and there's something that you get when you're in person with people that you don't get when you're doing stuff on Zoom, which is the way all of us have had to operate for the past few years because of the pandemic. And for me, that's the privilege. There's always a sort of a devil's burden that you have to do, the devil's contract, where to get the support of a network to actually go off and tell the story and make them a yarn for network television in Australia, there are always compromises that you have to make. And I want to make my own version that basically presents the story in the way that I think it should be told, in more detail and in more length and more slightly complicated exposition for the audience, because I think there's so much there. I think we're in an incredibly exciting time right now. I think the phenomenon is showing itself more often, and I think that's deliberate, I suspect. And I think the pressure and the momentum for the United States government, but also other governments around the world, including the British government in particular, to be more candid about what they know is slowly growing. There's a momentum here that I've not seen before. And that was the biggest takeaway for me from the United States, is that behind the scenes, while I'm talking on camera to people like Tim Burchett, I'm also talking behind the scenes to congressional staffers, congressmen, senators, and congresswomen, by the way, and trying to basically find out what's really going on in those committees. And the thing that I don't think I realized, and I certainly don't think many of the people following this issue quite realize, is how much has been going on in the Congress behind the scenes. And I went to the United States incredibly pessimistic, frankly, that there was going to be any kind of public hearings. I mean, after that polite farce in mid-May that passed for the two intelligence officials, generously sharing with us one blurry image of a little object about a half a mile away from a plane cockpit. And we were meant to feel grateful that they were admitting that they couldn't explain this one incident. But don't worry, they're commercial drones and we'll resolve it all very soon. So don't you worry your tiny little heads about this. I was very depressed that Congress was going to allow itself to be snowed, and that essentially there was going to be a continuation of what many of my interviewees in the story actually said is a cover-up, and has been a cover-up for all of 70 years. And the thing that was my takeaway in the United States was that there is a momentum here that the United States even can't control. So much information out there in the public domain. The phenomenon appears to be manifesting itself so more frequently, both to military and commercial pilots, that the ability to just sit on it and snow media. I think a lot of the mainstream media continues to be snowed, quite frankly, and stays away from the subject matter because they're unnecessarily scared of the ridicule and the stigma that's been attached to it in the past. But I do think there's a change, and that was my biggest takeaway from my visit, that everybody I spoke to, there is a steel in the Congress. They know they've been bullshitted. And the reason they know that is because they've had private hearings that you and I don't know a lot of detail about. Yes, there've been videos shown. People have attended in secure skiffs where they've been briefed on incidents and told and shown videos. There are already quiet hearings happening. And the thing that I had the opportunity to literally go and sit on park benches in different cities and meet some of the sources who helped me with my original book, In Plain Sight. And a number of them have been approached by congressional staffers and asked to give evidence. There's a momentum here. There's a lot that I can't talk about, unfortunately, where it's obvious to me that there is a rollout. There's a plan happening. There is a very deliberate strategy by a very dedicated and committed group of people to get this story out there.
So the biggest takeaway for Ross on his trip with Bryce across the U.S. is meeting with these people in person. Okay, what he really found is there's so much more going on behind the scenes. You'll see in this next clip that really he sees that Congress is pissed. Okay, Congress, the people he talked to, the staffers he talked to, feel like they've been lied to. They feel like enough evidence has come to the surface now that these Congress people are pissed. And they want to get to the bottom of this. They want to get to the truth. And he shows here that maybe there's a reason for that.
And secretly, I discovered all around the world, there are people who've been exposed to UAPs, including people at Skinwalker Ranch, who are now part of a study. And sadly, there are people who have died. Damien said on my documentary that he's aware that there are people who have died, and there are. And I think Damien wouldn't mind me saying he's quite worried that he might die from what has happened to him. This is serious. You know, there is a phenomenon here that is very, very real. Nobody's saying for sure that it's alien or ET or little green men from Zeta Reticuli. But there is a phenomenon that perhaps inadvertently, when humans engage with it, it's hurting people. And that's serious. And there is a concern at very high levels in intelligence services and defense departments around the world, notably in the US, that they have a duty of care to their employees. And it kind of came out accidentally in many ways as a result of investigations into the Havana syndrome phenomenon, where US diplomats were being exposed to what appeared to be anomalous radiation. But they discovered that there was a cohort of people that, when they did the analysis, I think it was Kit Green, formerly from the CIA's Weird Desk, who picked this up. There's this phenomenon that is not explainable at the moment, that they're still investigating, that is genuinely concerning good people, military pilots, intelligence officials, people like Damien, who are civilian witnesses. They're being exposed in ways that are actually quite dangerous. And if I've encompassed it in that answer, I hope I have. There is a very real response that's happening behind the scenes to the phenomenon.
Yeah, I feel like that's part of the struggle of disclosures, that you have a lot of these programs that were approaching the phenomenon, whether real or not. And a lot of people, like a friend of mine, Chris Bartell, he worked at security at Skinwalker Ranch, may have, had MRIs done on him and had no idea why during the time. And so it's very interesting, the layers of that and how many people may have been affected and not even known during part of these programs.
And this is the thing for me as a journalist that fascinated me, because I freely admit, when I first started digging into this area aggressively, probably back in 2016, 2017, when I first started conceiving the idea of a book, I freely admit I started out as an ambitious debunker. My idea was to get to the bottom of the dark black program inside the US government that's been responsible for this technology all these years. And I suspect that there is some black technology that can explain at least part or some of this phenomenon, perhaps even the Tic Tac. But the thing that I'm not satisfied is we cannot explain the whole phenomenon. And this was the beginning for me of the cognitive dissonance, because at the very beginning of my research, I requested and obtained the kind of standard briefings that national security journalists can get on the QT from different people. What's the story behind this UFO thing? And the stock standard answer is, look, Ross, it's no threat to national security. It really isn't a flight safety risk, and more importantly, it can mostly be prosaically explained. Yes, there's probably some atmospheric phenomena there that'll probably explain it. And I strongly suggest you read the Condign report, which is the British investigation, and if you read that, you'll see that, frankly, they came up with the explanation that it's probably some kind of plasma phenomenon that still hasn't been described in nature. And so I was sort of forewarned and forearmed with that apparently plausible explanation. And then I started doing what investigative journalists are meant to do, which is, okay, ignore the accepted reality. Let's go and look at the evidence. Let's go and talk to the people who purport to know. And then I started hearing a vastly different story. And what was very interesting was that a lot of those people were talking about the fact that they were being engaged with by US government agencies. When I was talking to people about metamaterials, yes, I do happen to think that some of the metamaterials, notably a magnesium bismuth sample that's been much trumpeted by TTSA, I personally think that's nonsense and that it's probably a piece of industrial slag. But in the course of speaking to people about metamaterials, I became aware that contemporaneously, just off to my right shoulder, there were people from the US government who were engaging with some of the people that I was engaging with. And frankly, if it's all BS, why were they there? And then it kept on happening. The CRADA, for example, I talked about that earlier. Why did the US Army sign a CRADA with TTSA and provide some of their own alleged metamaterials if this is all nonsense? And again, I keep on coming back to this. I've raised this with Vinnie and discussed it with him in the past. To me, the absolute smoking gun where people need to sit up and take notice, and for any layperson watching this who isn't familiar with the phenomenon and not across recent UAP history, just go and read, either in my book or in any of the analyses that have been done, the explanation of the significance of the leaked WikiLeaks emails that detailed John Podesta, Hillary Clinton's senior advisors, exchanges with people like General Neil McCasland, General Michael Carey, Lockheed Martin's Robert Weiss, and explain to me, why was a senior staffer to Hillary Clinton having a conversation with two very senior, very interesting US Air Force generals about disclosure with Hillary Clinton? And why has the US national media not engaged with Hillary Clinton or Bill Clinton on that matter, and discussed with them what they really think now about what they were told in Bill's time as president? The reason why we put Bill's comment to the young boy in Ireland into the story is because I personally think Bill was misled about Roswell. I don't think Mr. Clinton was in any way in any position on the evidence to be able to definitively state that Roswell was not the crash of some kind of craft. And I think the difficulty that he had is that he's only ever as good as a president as the people who've advised him. Was there, and this is the central issue here, was there an intention to deceive a president of the United States? If Roswell is real, if it was some kind of crashed craft, and multiple people have said that it was, and frankly, I don't think the US Air Force explanation stands scrutiny. Were there other crash recoveries? And I think there were. Mm-hmm. I've been told by people that they were. I was briefed by Nat Kovitz, a former chief geek for the US Navy, former director of science technology development for the US Navy, that there was a crash retrieval program that he was briefed into. I've spoken to other people who've told me that there was a crash retrieval program. I've spoken to other people who've told me categorically that they believe Roswell was the real crash of a non-human craft. Now, I'm not saying that it was, because I don't know for sure. But was the key issue for me, and I think this is the key issue for Congress, was a president deceived? And that's where we're getting into territory that I think the Congress will now start investigating. That's why this is exciting.
And what he mentions there, the smoking gun, okay, the big smoking gun, is the emails. So what's interesting is when I was in the Air Force, actually, we were forbidden from even looking at WikiLeaks. So when that WikiLeaks thing happened, we're in any instance, even at our home, we could not go and look at WikiLeaks. So I feel kind of weird coming and looking at WikiLeaks. But this is it. Okay, these are one of the emails I found for John Podesta regarding talks with Edgar Mitchell. So Edgar Mitchell was the sixth man on the moon. He was an astronaut. He started the Institute of Noetic Sciences. He's a huge ufologist buff, if you will. And he was dying at the time. Okay, so I'll just read through this email. This is from Terry Mansfield. Okay, he's the Peace Task Force Director, the ETI, Peace Task Force Director. And basically on behalf of Edgar Mitchell, SCD, Apollo 14 astronaut, sixth man to walk on the moon. So he writes here to John Podesta in 2015. Hugs John. I write on behalf of Dr. Mitchell to request your Skype talk with him as soon as possible regarding disclosure and the difference between celestials in our own solar system and their restraint by those from the non-violent contiguous universe. Edgar recently closed Quantrek due to health reasons. His talk with you, John, is of great importance, given the alternative of your not being aware of these key distinctions, heralding either intergalactic warfare or peace. It is also imperative that after you talk with Edgar, he then speak directly with President Obama via Skype for historical purposes about the same issue while the president is still in office. John, Edgar has consulted on consciousness matters for American presidents in the past, has addressed the UN General Assembly twice. He is not in need of a personal experience, wishes only to serve. Thank you and Aaron for letting me know the dates. Another key point here in another email. Okay, this email sent June 25th, 2014 is from Edgar. So, dear John Podesta, as we move into the last half of 2014, the need for extraterrestrial disclosure intensifies. Thank you for your kind consideration and response to my email. 50 years ago, Battelle, Brookings, and Rand studies on UFOs convinced the government to remove knowledge of the extraterrestrial presence from the citizens of our country. These organizations advised with their best information. However, today much, if not most, of the extraterrestrial reality they examined is known by our citizens. These organizations' resultant strategies and policies of 50 years ago no longer hold credibility or benefit. 5 decades of UFO information have dramatically shifted the public awareness of an extraterrestrial presence, and yet our government is still operating from outdated beliefs and policies. These are detrimental to trust in government, transparency, science, religion, and responsible citizenry embracing the next step in our country's space travel and research. 3 disclosure issues are prominent. Planet sustainability via next generation energies such as zero-point energy, galactic travel, and research taken as an advanced species aware of the extraterrestrial presence, not as uninformed explorers who revert to colonialism and destruction. And 3, the example of a confident, engaged government who respectfully regards the wisdom and intellect of its citizens as we move into space. I respectfully receive your response to my request for conversation on disclosure. Okay, the follow-on emails basically go through this meeting, which ended up happening on Skype. From what I understand, all we have is the actual meeting setup. But what you have here is Tom DeLonge, okay, from To the Stars Academy. This is General McCasland. Okay, he was a 3-star general. M. Fisher is a staffer for Hillary Clinton at the time. John Podesta. Then we have Weiss. So Weiss is a Lockheed Martin rep, so high up in Lockheed Martin. He seems interested in environmental sustainability. And then General Kerry was also a 3-star general in the Air Force. So very interesting meeting. I think this is what he refers to. Edgar Mitchell, he references zero-point energy in another email saying that extraterrestrial intelligences want to bring the zero-point energy to Earth, to our civilization to help us out, but we need to be ready, etc. So interesting stuff. And for the final section, lucky to have Vinnie Adams. He just released the Calvine Photo. Vinnie just gives a quick update here on that investigation into that amazing photo. After 32 years of being lost, it is now found. Let's check that out. You mentioned about Calvine. It seemed like there was a specific wall, and I've heard that before from other, I guess, investigators, is, when you're trying to identify a disinformation campaign, what happen is there'll be nothing really on the subject, and all of a sudden there's a ton of stuff on that subject, and it all says the same stuff. All right, here we go.
Yeah, definitely. We know that 2 years after the incident, there were meetings in the Pentagon with defense intelligence from UK going over to discuss. The 3-star generals are very angry that these photographs were being passed around. And this is no rock in the pool. This is no kite in front of the camera kind of thing, Like Ross said, and we kind of briefly touched upon, we have sources inside defense intelligence from the UK that we've spoken to separately, I may add, that have contacted me and some of our team who have corroborated stories. And do we believe it wholeheartedly? No, because you can't. But we've had corroboration from people outside government as well. But we're still piecing the puzzle together, and it's going to be a long process. It's already been over a year. We've released the photo. Let's do another year if it takes that long. But we have to do the investigation properly.
So what do you guys think? I was initially pessimistic after that last hearings. I mean, that was embarrassing. We got nothing. We've received basically no information, and we had hoped something was going on in the background. You hear from all these guys, Lou Elizondo, Christopher Mellon. Lou Elizondo saying that they are not done. Okay, Congress is coming hard. It looks like they are, man. Gary Nolan, he's speaking out. He's encouraging other people to speak out. So it looks like I'm optimistic, man. I think early next year we could be seeing open hearings and actually getting some real disclosure. Check out the full-length interview on UAP Society YouTube and the link to the docu-series. So the series so far released from Ross Coulthart will be down in the description. So check those out as well. Support the channel on patreon.com/Chris Lehto. You can get your name in the credits. Thank you so much to all the patrons. Couldn't do it without your support and mentorship. And if you want to join UAP Society, join the team, get your hands dirty, then go to uapsociety.com. Have a great week. Peace.